Hi. So the archive should Hi. So the archive should be rolling, and we're going to get started with the week three office hours session. And again, I think somebody just joined audio. The audio for the participants is muted, and that means that we shouldn't have the feedback we had before. And I'm really sorry, I didn't know that I had that privilege, that power um, previously. So please type your questions. Okay, so this week we worked with content types for the first time. In Drupal, content types are structures for creating content where each content type holds content that is structurally different than other pieces of content. So a really simple way to illustrate what I mean when I say structurally different content is that, for example, as a piece of content, an image differs greatly from an event. If you're going to record information about an event, it's you're concerned with dates and like a description of the event. And if you're going to store and present images in your CMS, clearly, one criteria is that you need to have an an image, like a JPEG file, to upload, and there won't necessarily be dates associated with images in the same way that there are necessarily dates associated with events. Oh, V. Dearborn says, I can hear you. This is my first time coming to the hour live. Great, V. Dearborn, glad to have you. And this is the first time that we haven't had major technical difficulties early on. So I think this seems to be running smoother. Once again, for anybody who just joined, the audio on your end is muted so that there's no feedback. And I didn't know that I had that privilege. Okay, so for this week's assignments, we created two content types, image and event, and then we added some content. And it's important to note that just because you're creating content types and adding content doesn't yet mean that the display of the content is really nailed down. So one of the things that makes working with a CMS both really awesome and kind of frustrating is that the storage and the data entry of your content is separate from the display of your content. So if you were just going to like hand code, say, an image gallery in regular HTML, you would just embed all your images on one page and hand code all that. In Drupal, if we're going to make an image gallery, to really take advantage of the image gallery, to really take advantage of the dynamic capacity of the CMS, we need to store all that data and then query it out as a separate function, and that function is provided by the views module, which we'll talk about, I think, next week. Okay, so I have a note from Wei Li, who cannot hear me. Hang on a sec. So I need to confirm whether this is like an audio problem or some other problem. Okay, you're both on. You're all who. Okay. Well, see, I just tested all this and it worked great. And my fear was that maybe it wouldn't scale to having 10 people involved. My mic is all the way up. And I have no control. Here we go. Is this any better or any worse? This is good. Can those who... I'm louder, that's good. And Deanne, yeah, I muted all the participants' microphones. I'm almost positive that I did not mute people's audio. Okay. Yes, you are a little loud. So if I'm a little loud, that should be easy for you to turn down on your end. Okay. Some people are having to come in through phone. That's good. V, Dearborn, can you try calling in via phone? You should have a join by phone. Oh, you can't hear me. Cool. Okay. I'm going to keep going, but before I do, well, technical difficulties aside, are there any other questions, you know, on the topic of Drupal and content types? Go ahead and type them in, of course, because you're all muted. Jack has a question. Good. So while Jack's typing his question, I am going to, well, here we go. Oh, so this is a good question just about the nature of the course. Sometimes the screenshots may differ from what you see on your end. Either that means that you're doing something wrong, or it means that there's something different about my screenshots. And that could be because of upgrades to the modules since I created the screenshots. The screenshots are fairly recent, but they're not... new modules come out like all the time. So there might be some slight variations in what the modules are doing, but everything should be pretty much the same. So the big sort of gotcha here is that if you do something a little bit differently on day one in the configuration, then the way that you're seeing things on week 3 might look a little different. And this is an unfortunate reality when you're dealing with like a complex system like Drupal, and especially the fact that it's open source and has a lot of contributors makes it even more complex to work with sometimes. So one thing that I like to stress just in general is that, well, this is just my nature and how I work with these systems and these like learning opportunities. It's always more valuable to me to just kind of get in and like poke around and be bold and try things than follow the directions word by word, like pixel by pixel. That said, the screenshots should be accurate enough, and I'm sorry if they're not. And you can always feel free to send me a note on the forum or via email if you're seeing something that just doesn't look right. And if you can provide me a screenshot of what you're seeing, that'll help me troubleshoot, and it'll help us make the course better for future sessions. Jack, does that answer your question in a long, sort of roundabout way? Yeah, and there's nothing, these are just sandbox sites. They're meant to, I think the reason we use the word sandbox is that it connotes this idea of playfulness. So yeah, you should feel free to make sense or make mistakes. Okay, I saw a couple of other questions come up while I was explaining. Deanne asks, images, can you show us again how to set up the browse on the images? Yeah, and I responded to your forum post about this, so you can reference that if you haven't seen that already. But let me just show you real quick. Assuming that your modules for IMCE and IMCE WYSIWYG bridge are both enabled. Okay, so IMCE is enabled on my site, and IMCE WYSIWYG API bridge. Assuming these two are enabled, then you can go to configuration and go to WYSIWYG profiles and then edit this profile and make sure in buttons and plugins, make sure that the IMCE button is enabled. And then also make sure the image button is enabled, but based on the screenshot you sent me, that your image button is definitely enabled, so it might be that this one isn't. But you won't even see this option unless the IMCE and the IMCE WYSIWYG API bridge modules are both enabled. So those are like 3 things to check, and then it should just work. But then I should add that the user permissions for WYSIWYG and IMCE are really kind of confusing and complicated, and as soon as you start adding additional users to your site, like right now it's probably just you, but as soon as you start adding additional users, you have to go into the IMCE profiles and set up some profiles for your additional user roles. And we can, if you get to that point and you want to ask me about it later. Let's just move on. Right now, the main thing is that you, as the admin, have access to that stuff for now. Okay, were there any other questions? Okay, I think we're caught up on your questions. Feel free to ask anything else. Can you use Drupal for standalone sites? Yeah, absolutely. Mary Beth, can you describe more what you mean by standalone sites? Because I would consider, like, each of you has your own standalone site right now. They all have similar URLs, but they're all unique sites. Is that what you mean, or? pausing to give Mary Beth the chance to follow up with her question. Okay, here we go. Most of the content is in the blogs to be open to contributors. Yeah, absolutely. This is very common. So it's very common to have one site with multiple bloggers, and you would handle all of that through user roles and permissions. So you could set up a user role, and you know, this might be a big shortcoming in the design of this course, but I didn't even go into user roles in this course, just because it varies so much from project to project. But if you go to people and permissions, I think we're loading here. Here we go. People, permissions, and roles. You can add a new role called blogger. And then you can tweak your permissions for the blogger role and give them only the ability to post blog entries. And then, like, they won't have access to touch anything else on the site. So this is really common to have multiple roles for a project of any size. And Wei Li asks, and each site should have a separate Drupal install. Yeah, there's a couple ways to handle dealing with multiple sites. Multiple sites can share the same Drupal install, or you can have a separate Drupal install for each site. And I think everybody just kind of has a personal preference, and it just kind of depends how many sites you have, and how many developers you have, and how many sysadmins you have, and who all is dealing with the site. And then, like, I think it also depends on whether you should have a multi-site install or a single standalone site that for each instance. Whether you do single or multi just depends a lot on who's using it and what the content is, and ultimately it's your choice. The site, before we we need to jump into the week's lesson soon, but I've mentioned this before. The sites that you guys are using right now are actually part of one big multi-site installation. So there's like 70 or 80 sites on one Drupal instance. And I did that because I was going to be ultimately managing updates and stuff for like 70 sites. So I just wanted to have them all in one place so it would just be easier. So all of these sites share the same code base, and they share the same modules and themes. It's kind of interesting how it works. But anyway, let's jump into the actual lesson content for the week. And you can feel free to post questions as I go. So this week we created a few content types, 2 content types, I think. So I mentioned content types are structures in Drupal for storing nodes that differ, where the content differs structurally. So the content specs for an image are different than that of an event. Nita asks, can different sites have different themes, or should they use the same theme? So if you have multiple sites, they can certainly have different themes. Yeah, without a doubt. So that's yeah, no problem at all. Okay, so I'm going to just jump in and demo how to create a couple content types. And by the way, if any of you are still like having trouble with creating content types, what I'm going to do is I'm going to package these content types into basically into a module that you can just enable on your site, and it'll just magically make the content types appear for you, so that you can kind of see the example of what I've done and compare it to what you've done. I think that'll work. I don't see why it wouldn't. So anyway, look for that later. But I go to structure, content types, and add a new content type. And then every content type needs a name. So I'm going to do event first. And you can add a description too. And then there are some options for setting up the default settings for nodes as you add them. So, you know, like let's say that I wanted to change the title field label. This is an event. We're dealing with events. So let's say I don't think that the field title makes much sense here. Let's say I want to call it event name, something like that. I can change that, and this just affects the admin UI. It doesn't really change anything in terms of like the database tables or anything. I can change my settings with regard to publishing and promoting. We've talked a little bit about promoting to front page, and I've mentioned that I almost never utilize this feature. So when I create a new content type, I usually just untoggle promoted to front page. And then we can toggle whether we want the display settings to show up. So like with event, okay, so like this just means the author name and the publication date will show up on the post itself. And this makes sense for something like a blog post or a news article, but it doesn't really make sense for events. Like we don't really care who authored the post, and we don't really care about the dates on which the post was authored. For an event, we care more about the date associated with the event itself. So anyway, I'm going to disable this. Comments are up to you. Maybe you want comments on your events, maybe you don't. And you can toggle which menus, if any, you want these nodes to appear in. And so this does not mean that, like if I untoggle main menu, this does not mean that this does not preclude me from having a calendar link on my menu. What this means is that if I make the main menu available for each node, each event post, like toddler story time at 2 p.m. on Friday, could potentially be on the main menu. And I'm going to say, like, I don't really want this. So, like, I don't really need any given event to show up on my menu. So I'm just going to disable it. And then I can click Save and Add Fields. So for this lesson, I gave you guys one field to add, and it was simply the date field. So this is really simple. I can have as many fields as I want, and by storing data as distinct fields, I can pull out, like later on, I can pull out data for specific displays and specific ways of sorting the data. So like, I don't know, like maybe one of the best ways to describe this is that like your MARC records in your library catalog have potentially hundreds of fields, but then when your OPAC users search for a book, say, in the search results list, they see only like title, author, and a short description. So they see only a few of those mark fields. And then when they click into the record, they see a fuller set of fields, but they don't see every field. So this is really similar in Drupal and other database systems. When you separate the data into fields, it just makes it easier to display and sort the data in different ways later for different contexts. So I could just as easily mention the date in the body of my post, but then I wouldn't have the date data available for sorting and searching and displaying later on. And that'll make a lot more sense when we get into views. Let me just pause for this question. Mary Beth asks, I want to go back and choose pop-up calendar. What pathway takes me there? That's a good question. Let me save this, and then I'll go back and show you how to edit later. Oh, the field name date already exists. Did I create this already, or is this part of stock? Did you guys run into this problem too, where it says the field date already exists? Either Miriam says yes, Nita says no. There's part of the date module creates the date field on your behalf, and so if you enable, I think it might be the date tools module, and I don't remember if I told you guys to enable that or not. But if you enable that module, it creates some date stuff for you, so that might just be a glitch in the instructions. Sorry if that tripped you guys up. So each field needs a unique name, so I'm just going to call this field date2. And then I can specify which attributes to collect. So do I want down to the second? No, probably not. But I probably do want minutes in case an event starts at 2:30 instead of 2 p.m. So then I can collect an end date. End dates don't need to be required. If you have something like a submission deadline, that doesn't have an end date. But if you have something like Toddler Story Time, it has a start date and an end date. You can select the time zone settings. I think I told you guys not to allow users to have their own time zones. So, but regardless, most of your users will be anonymous users, and just leave this as site time zones, and then save. So what I just saved were some settings for the global date field, and then I can, the global date to field, because remember I had to call it date to. Now I can change some settings for the specific instance of this iteration of the date field. In other words, the date field in the context of the event content type. We can set some of our own settings here. I'm just going to blow through this and hit save. Can Drupal pick up time zone from system? That's a really good question. I think you're asking, can Drupal pick up the time zone of the like the host server of the client user? I don't see why not. Typically that doesn't occur though. I don't see why you couldn't make that happen. In the same way that you can pick up like location data from the host and set like translation settings or something like that automatically. So that's a really good question, and I don't know if that's available to you right away, but certainly you could customize your system to do that. I just hadn't thought of that before. Typically, events are most of the time events are tied to like a physical location. So 2 p.m. story time at your library is always 2 p.m. at your library. So it doesn't matter what your end user's time zone is when he's looking at your site. Obviously, though, for virtual events, like this virtual event, time zone is relevant. So, Parallel, that's a good question, and let's maybe look into that later. Okay, so I saved that date field, and now if I want to change the widget, how the data is entered, I just click on the widget name and I can change it. So, Mary Beth, maybe you entered your date field as a select list the first time. You can just click on select list and change to pop-up calendar. There are some settings that you can't change once the field has data, but something like the input widget, certainly you could change that anytime you wanted to. So for the event content type, I told you guys just to add that date field and then you were done. You could also add additional fields too, like you could have a taxonomy for location if you have like a lot of branches or a lot of locations within your building. You could add location data just based on maybe taxonomy or something. You could also have audience or maybe age group or audience, whatever you want to call it. Or you could have like a content, like a subject taxonomy term, like art or movies or whatever, however you wanted to categorize your events. I'm sure there are other fields too that you could think of. Anyway, there's generally not a limit to the number of fields that you could dream up and add to any content type, but we just kept it really simple for this one. The next part of the lesson, I'm going to move on, but feel free to post questions about event stuff. For the next part of this week's lesson, we added an image content type. And I don't want these promoted. I don't want to display author and date information. I don't want them available in the menu. I'm going to save. I forgot to hit save and add fields. So now I can go to manage fields and go back and add some fields. So here we added the image field, which already exists. This just lets you upload images from your hard drive and they're stored as fields in Drupal. And this way we can add the content. You can upload the field from your hard drive into Drupal, and then we can collect that. We can collect those images later as an image gallery in views, and you'll see that soon, if not next week. I think it's the week after that we do the image gallery stuff. So again, you can set things like the maximum image resolution, the minimum image resolution. Like maybe you don't want anybody to upload an image that's smaller than 10 by 10. You can also set the maximum upload size. So like, let's say you don't want your users to upload huge JPEGs because they'll just take up extra space on your server. You can set the maximum upload size to like 1 megabyte. This setting is limited by your PHP settings. So I don't remember if this setting is what comes with PHP or if I already tweaked this. Sometimes though, like the PHP settings are a little low, so you just need to go in or have your host or your developer or your hosting provider tweak the PHP settings to allow larger file uploads. 2 megabytes seems a little low. I don't know, and that's definitely not something that maximum setting is definitely not something that you can really change when that setting is not something that you can really change when just in the browser. It's something you have to do on the server. Jack says, I'm getting a message the conference will end. I don't think the conference will end unless, is anybody else getting that? I don't think it ends until I say it ends, but that's weird. Huh. Okay. Interesting. Well, as long as you guys can still hear me, then I think we're good. Okay, so I'm going to set the maximum upload size to 1 megabyte, and I'm going to enable alt and title fields. This is, pretty standard. I don't know why it's not default. And then I can have as many values, as many images as I want, but I'm going to keep it to 1 image per node, and that'll make a little more sense when we make this image gallery a little later. The idea is that each image gets its own node, its own separate place in the database, so that each image will have a title, a body / caption, and an image. You could also upload several images per node, but then you wouldn't have the ability to have like a distinct caption for each image, or it just wouldn't be as straightforward. So anyway, I'm going to recommend that you keep this set to 1 image per node. Hit save. I don't remember if we did this in the assignment, but you can change the body field to call it caption. This will just make a little more sense in the UI. Otherwise, when users are going in to upload content, they're not really going to know what the heck you mean by body, but caption makes a little more sense in this context. Is this all sounding good so far? Any questions? I'm going to pause a minute for questions. So if there are no questions, then I'm going to check on the rest of what I wanted to cover today. Oh, here we go. Wei says, will you show us how the events and images are on our site? Yeah, I'm gonna upload some content just to show. Hang on a sec. I just got an alert that a client site went down, so I'm emailing a partner. Sorry for the pause. Okay, so okay, Pramila asks, what is image values? Oh, okay. Okay, so I will upload some content here in a sec. Let me go back and discuss the image values again. And then I'll show how to upload some content, and then I'll show you how to find the content or how it's displayed. So I have the ability to upload 1 image per node, or say 2 images per node, or 3 or 4, or unlimited. To me, this all has to do with how the content will ultimately be displayed. So if I want to have each image stored as its own entity in the database, then I'm going to leave this setting at 1. If I want to collect all the images together, like let's say I want to create like a photo essay. I think this is maybe a common use case. If I wanted to create a photo essay where I have a long piece of written copy and then like 8 to 10 images associated with that long piece of written copy, I could set that value higher than 1. And then the node would store not just one piece of content, not just one image, but a lot of images. And then I'd have one body or one caption. Need to ask, so you cannot upload multiple images at once. Out of the box, no, you can't. There was a module for Drupal 6 that allowed multiple images to be uploaded at once, and I don't know if that module is maintained in Drupal 7. I haven't looked at it in a while, but normally, no, that's not a feature that you have out of the box. So, Pramila, does that make sense about uploading the number of values and so forth? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to create some content. Let's create an image first. I pulled up this site because, you know, we're librarians and we like cats. There's this site called Place Kitten, which lets you create some cute placeholder images, and like web designers always need placeholder content. So it's kind of fun to look for creative ways to create placeholder content. So Place Kitten lets me create a nice image that I can use for my dummy site. Let's make sure that's saved as a JPEG. Yeah, it looks good. Okay, so I'm going to add an image. So like I said, the image, the field will have a title, and then we changed this to say caption. Normally, out of the box, this would just say body, but I think if we're dealing with images, it makes more sense to call this field a caption. So this can be some long text, as long as you want. You'll have your CK editor available here if you're using full HTML. So then, for the image galleries, rather than embedding an image in the body, which you know you have the option of doing, we're going to upload the image as its own field. And this is going to make it a lot easier later to, hang on, here we go. When we upload the image as its own field, it's going to be a lot easier to deal with the image in a dynamic Drupal CMS sort of way. Oops, I'm talking while I do this and I didn't save that file. Oh, but it uploaded anyway. Okay, so here's my node, here's my post with a title, a caption, and an image. So, like I mentioned, this is not yet a gallery. When I have 10 of these available, I can make a gallery out of it, but right now this is just one single image. So it's as if when you were looking at, if you can envision the gallery, the thumbnails, in an array, like a grid, say, 6 wide by 8 high, whatever, images, thumbnails that are in a display of a gallery. Just use your imagination at this point. When you click on the thumbnail, you go to the full post. So right now, this is the full post. The thumbnail part of it comes later. That's in views. There are immediately some things that I think I want to change about this display. So let's go back into the display and let's change some settings about how this post will look. The first thing I don't really like is that I don't really need this label here, so I'm going to hide it. The next thing that I don't really like about this is that it's a little too wide for this layout because I have this sidebar content and this is a fixed width layout. I want to be able to kind of scale this image down a little bit so that it fits. So I'm going to go back into structure, content types, image, and I'm going to hit manage display. So here is where I can manage the way that the fields are displayed to the end user. Before I was in manage fields, and this kind of is how we manage the fields themselves and the information about the fields, and that's how you add new fields or delete fields. In the manage display tab, this is where you manage the end user display. So I don't really want the image label to appear, and I felt like that was a little too small. So, it was a little too big. So I want to like crunch it down a little bit so that it fits in the page a little better. So I'm going to hit this little gear, and I'm going to change the image style. And I changed it to medium, and there are a few stock image styles that come with Drupal. And this is a lot like Flickr that you guys are familiar with. I think most of you, where when you upload the full huge JPEG from your camera into Flickr, Flickr automatically creates 4 or 5 or 6 different sizes. It's the same with Drupal. You upload the image at its original size, and then you, the admin, can create as many thumbnail or other types of styles that you want. So I'm going to hit save. I think this will make a little more sense when we look at the display. So because I got rid of the image label and I changed it to medium, and now it's really small. I would say that's smaller than medium. That looks small to me. And just for what it's worth, with the Drupal image styles, Drupal is actually creating a new version of the image. So this image is not like a big image that got crunched down in the browser. It's actually a new version of the image that I uploaded. Does that make sense to people? Any questions about display or image styles? Oh, okay. This is a good question. Mary Beth asks, how do you wrap text around an image? This would happen in code, yeah. Specifically in CSS, and the style, the CSS style is called float. So just Google CSS float and read about it. Float just makes text flow around images. Let's see if there's an example here. Well, they're not really giving a good example. But yeah, that's how you would do it. Need to ask, is there a setting to replace the existing image? Well, if you wanted to replace the existing image, you could just edit the node, remove the image, and then upload a new one. What I didn't do before, because I was going too fast, is I didn't set up any alt text or title text. Yeah, style equals float left or right. That's true, except the way we're uploading this image, we don't have access to the style. Like, we can't add the attribute directly to the field here. And that's that comes with the territory of dealing with a CMS. You don't have as much flexibility to just add styles in line. So what you would do is just add the style to your style sheet in CSS, in the CSS file. And that's something that we can talk a little bit about actually in the very last lesson, because that's all like theming. Oh, did you say this is image gallery? No, this is not the image gallery. This is a single image. This is like the full post. So the gallery will be a set of thumbnails that will link to each individual post. Does that make sense? Okay, so we've got like 4 minutes. I just wanted to quickly mention that after you create this content, it's gonna get lost immediately because it's not anywhere in the front end UI yet. That comes later with views. So if you want to find the content you created previously, hit Find Content, and you can see my kitten node is right there on the top. And if you've created a bunch of content and you want to filter it, you can filter by content type. Some pretty simple ways to find content. When you're dealing with, eventually when you're dealing with like thousands of nodes, this can become a little cumbersome, but for right now on your demo sites, you should be able to use this Find Content button to find the stuff that you've been working with. Okay, Mary Beth says, so you can store images here and then display them in blog posts, for example. That's a really good question. That's kind of how WordPress works, I think. You have like your library, and then you can pull from that library when you're creating a blog post. That's not really how Drupal works out of the box. So what you would do is you would need to upload them later in the blog post itself. But now that I'm saying that, I'm thinking you could use the media module to make that content available, to make these images that we're uploading here available elsewhere. Yeah, okay. I'm going to type this in for you guys. In case the audio is not clear enough. You could use the media module, I think. I usually have just used that for video, but it would also work for image content. It's just not something I've had the pleasure of doing. Any other, and that's the media thing is new in Drupal 7, so it's something I guess I'm still like getting used to. Any other questions? Okay, well, we quickly went through some of the basic stuff about week 3 assignments. This is starting to get into like the meat of what a Drupal site is all about: content types and fields. Next week we're gonna start working on views. I think that's next week, right? It must be. We're gonna start working on views, and views is the other side of the coin. So right now we're just storing the data. Next week we're gonna learn how to start querying that data, getting it out, and displaying it to the end users. Thanks everyone for coming. I'm glad this went a little bit smoother than last time. Thanks for all of you who emailed me with some suggestions on how to mute the basic stuff that I should have known already. Jack says, okay, you guys might start leaving, but let me talk about Jack's question. Jack says it's nice to check people's sites. You know, I do that as much as I can. If you have questions, feel free to ask and just kind of call that out. In other words, yeah, I'd love to keep track of all your sites. It's best if you can like sort of indicate some specific questions that you have. Nita says, is it possible to log in like 10 minutes early? Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm usually around like setting stuff up 10 minutes early. Maybe I can put on some music for you guys to listen to or something. Let's do that. Next week I'll just be here 10 minutes early if you want to log in and test your audio. Oh, voice seems not to be clear. The other thing I might try next week is I might try calling in. I think usually that's gives us a better connection than voice over IP. But I think we're getting down to like a good system for this. So thanks everyone. I'm gonna sign off. Talk to you later.